Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today we are diving into a real-life scientific detective story. It connects a super common thing we see in babies today right back to our deep evolutionary past. We're going back hundreds of thousands of years to basically figure out what makes us human.
So let's start with this massive mystery. Think about it. Out of all the mammals out there, why do our babies need such intense, round-the-clock care just to survive? I mean, a newborn foal is literally running around within hours. A baby monkey just clings right to its mom's back. But a human baby can't even hold its own head up. We've known for a long time this is uniquely human, but pinning down exactly when this extreme helplessness started in our evolutionary timeline, that has been incredibly tough to figure out. Until, well, a really weird clue popped up.
That first major clue hit us back in 2007. Anthropologist Yosuke Kaifu was looking at a famous ancient skull and made this funny but honestly brilliant observation. He literally just pointed out that the right side of the skull is slightly smushed. Now look, in paleontology, you expect some wear and tear, right? Bones get buried under literal tons of dirt and rock for millennia. But this specific smush was different, and was about to completely blow open our understanding of ancient childcare.
He was looking at flow. These are the skeletal remains of Homo floresiensis found in Indonesia. You probably know them as the famous hobbits of human evolution. We're talking about a human relative that stood just about a meter tall and lived up until 50,000 years ago. When looking at Flo's skull, the standard logic was just, oh, this asymmetrical shape is probably from an ancient disease or just getting crushed under rocks. But Kaifu? He just wasn't buying that it was random cave pressure.
So he actually takes the skull back to Japan and shows it to a clinician. And this clinician recognized it instantly. It wasn't random fossil damage at all. It looked exactly like deformational plagiocephaly, which is just a fancy way of saying the soft infant skull flattened out because of repeated pressure. It's actually a super common, totally harmless thing we see in modern babies today. It happens in about 1 in 6 infants. Usually the skull just rounds out on its own as they grow, though sometimes it does stick around all the way into adulthood. The biology behind how this happens is actually fascinating. Right after birth, human babies go through this massive, rapid brain growth. And to make room for all that expansion, the skull has to stay soft and pliable. But here's the catch. Because a baby's neck is so weak and they're completely helpless, they end up resting their heavy little head on one side a lot when you put them down. It's that repeated pressure on the exact same spot that flattens out the soft bone.
So here is the really crucial point. This infant helplessness, it's not just some biological accident. It is actually a necessary evolutionary trade-off for having these massive brains of ours. Every single one of us was born with a relatively underdeveloped brain and a soft, squishy skull for one simple reason: so we could physically fit through the birth canal. We basically have to finish our development on the outside, completely at the mercy of our caregivers.
And understanding that modern biological quirk led Kaifu's team to this light bulb moment, a really brilliant hypothesis. They wondered, could flat skulls and ancient hominins be the ultimate proof that they were just as helpless as our modern babies? Anthropologist Leah Betty over at University College London even said, "I thought it was a very ingenious study, because instead of desperately searching for incredibly rare, fragile fossilized baby skeletons, they realized they could just look for the permanent markers of ancient babyhood left right there on adult skulls."
Of course, to actually prove this, they couldn't just base it all on one single hobbit skull. They had to go big. So they set up this massive comparative study looking for patterns across hundreds of specimens. We're talking 508 skulls from modern humans, 996 skulls from great apes, and 5 incredibly rare adult skulls from Homo erectus.
And what they found was wild. When they looked at the great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, orangutans, species where the babies are actually pretty mobile early on, they just didn't see this pattern. But when they looked at modern human skulls, spanning all different ages, sexes, and even 1,000-year-old burial sites in Japan, this specific type of flattening was vastly more prevalent. Sure, there's always natural variation, but this distinct trait was heavily tied to our specific, helpless human lineage.
But guys, the investigation really heated up when they started looking way further back in time, deep into our evolutionary history. We are talking 100,000 to 300,000 years ago. This is long before the hobbits in Indonesia and way before modern humans even started walking the earth.
They started examining these ancient skulls of Homo erectus from Indonesia. Now, Homo erectus is a very distant ancestor to both us and Neanderthals, and their brains were only about 2/3 the size of ours. Out of the 5 adult Homo erectus skulls they could get their hands on, an astonishing 2 of them showed clear evidence of this exact same flattening. That is huge for such a tiny sample size.
And that brings us to the core conclusion of all this. Because those ancient Homo erectus skulls didn't show the kind of random distortions you'd expect if they just got crushed during fossilization, we're now looking at skull flattening across 3 entirely separate evolutionary lineages: modern humans, Homo floresiensis, and Homo erectus. This definitively points to some incredibly deep evolutionary roots for infant helplessness.
Anthropologist Scott Williams pointed out that they made a really strong case here, highlighting what a massive leap forward this new method is. In the past, if you wanted to figure out infant development in Homo erectus, you had to rely on super rare, incredibly incomplete fossilized baby skulls. And let's be real, finding an intact, fragile baby skull from 300,000 years ago is basically impossible. This clever workaround totally bypasses that problem by using resilient adult skulls to look back in time at their infancy.
But, science is an ongoing conversation. While the study concludes that these flat skulls are solid proof of ancient infant helplessness, pediatrician Herbert Renz-Polster brought up a really interesting counterpoint. He noted that the reason flattening is so common today is because modern babies sleep on their backs, on firm mattresses, or spend a lot of time sitting in car seats. He suspects that hundreds of thousands of years ago, babies were probably constantly carried and shifted around by caregivers, which means they might not have even experienced the sustained, static pressure you need to actually cause those asymmetries in the first place.
Even with that healthy debate about the exact physical mechanics of prehistoric baby carrying, a lot of scientists find the broader evidence incredibly convincing. As anthropologist Jeremy De Silva perfectly put it, the whole, it takes a village expression is pretty deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. Honestly, short of inventing a time machine, this adult skull evidence tells such a compelling story. It's this warm reminder that human babies have required a watchful eye, constant care, and a completely dedicated community of support for hundreds of thousands of years.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. Think about it. We've just traced the evolutionary origins of human childhood through a subtle, easily ignored little smush on a fossilized skull. It really makes you wonder, as we look at the everyday quirks and conditions we experience right now, what other ancient evolutionary mysteries are we just totally overlooking? What other deep secrets of our past are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone to connect the dots? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.